The medical bay of the ironclad Fang was cold and smelled of chemicals. Danny sat on a metal table while a Corvathi healer worked on his dislocated shoulder. The alien's claws were surprisingly gentle as they manipulated the joint. Back into place. Danny gritted his teeth against the pain. He had refused any numbing agents. He wanted to feel this, to remember it, to carry the memory of what he had survived. When the healer finished and left the room, Danny found himself alone with Thaxcrawl. The Huntmaster stood by the doorway, his massive arms crossed over his chest, watching Danny with those ancient amber eyes. "You are stubborn," Thaxcrawl said. It did not sound like a criticism. "My grandmother used to say the same thing," Danny replied. He flexed his shoulder carefully, testing the joint. It hurt, but it worked. She also said that stubborn people change the world while sensible people stay at home. Thaxcrawl let out a sound that might have been a laugh. It was short and rough, like a cough. "Your grandmother sounds like a warrior. She was a farmer, but she fought in a war when she was young. She survived things that would have broken most people." Danny looked up at the Huntmaster. "She taught me that strength is not about the size of your body. It is about what you carry inside. It is about refusing to give up, no matter how hard things get." The Huntmaster was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. "I have been a warrior for 40 years. I have fought in dozens of battles. I have killed enemies across 100 worlds. And in all that time, I have never seen anything like what I saw on Varkas." He walked closer and sat down on a bench across from Danny. Even sitting, he was almost twice Danny's height. "We Corvathi are proud," he said. "We believe that our way is the only way. We judge all other species by our standards, and we find them lacking. We have looked at humanity and seen only weakness. Soft skin, dull senses, small bodies. We called you prey things because we thought you were beneath us." He shook his head slowly. "We were fools." Danny said nothing. He simply listened. "I watched you in that jungle," Thaxcrawl continued. "I watched you adapt to an environment that should have killed you in hours. I watched you learn, study, plan. I watched you take on a predator that has killed experienced Corvathi hunters, and I watched you win. Not through brute strength, but through patience, intelligence, and will." He leaned forward, his amber eyes burning with intensity. "That is a kind of strength we do not understand. That is a kind of strength we have forgotten." Danny felt something loosen in his chest. For weeks, he had endured mockery and contempt. He had been called weak, soft prey. He had wondered if he would ever be seen as anything else. Now, for the first time, someone was looking at him and seeing what he truly was. Not a joke. Not a victim. A survivor. "There is something I wish to do," Thaxcrawl said. "Something that has not been done for many generations. But first, I must ask you a question. Will you accept a gift from me, Danny Lawson of Earth? Will you accept an honor that no outsider has received in over 800 years?" Danny's heart began to pound. "What kind of honor?" Thaxcrawl stood up and drew a knife from his belt. It was ancient, the blade dark with age, the handle wrapped in worn leather. He held it in his palm and showed it to Danny. "The right of kinship," he said. "The bond of brotherhood. It is the highest honor one Corvathi warrior can give to another. It means that I claim you as family, as blood, as one of my own. It means that any who harm you harm me. It means that your victories are my victories. Your enemies are my enemies." He met Danny's eyes. "It also means that you will forever be bound to our people. You will carry our traditions, our responsibilities, our burdens. It is not a gift given lightly, and it is not a gift that can be taken back." Danny looked at the knife, then at the Huntmaster. His mind raced with the implications. This was not just an honor. It was a statement. It was a declaration to every Kovathi in the galaxy that a human, a soft-skinned prey thing, was worthy of standing among their greatest warriors. Why? Danny asked. Why would you do this for me? Thaxcroll smiled, and for the first time, the expression looked warm instead of predatory. Because you have shown me something I thought impossible. Because you have reminded me that true strength comes in many forms. And because I see in you the spirit of a hunter, a warrior, a brother. I would be proud to call you family. Danny took a deep breath. Then he nodded. I accept. The ceremony took place in the main hall of the ironclad Fang, with the entire crew assembled to witness. Commander Dralvath stood at the front of the crowd, his scarred face solemn. The warriors who had mocked Danny stood in rows, their expressions a mix of shock and wonder. Kethoran was there too, standing in the back in the plain clothes of a labor worker, stripped of his armor and his honor. Thaxcroll walked to the center of the hall with Danny at his side. The Vorn skull had been cleaned and polished, and it sat on a pedestal behind them like a monument to what the young human had accomplished. The Huntmaster raised his voice so that everyone could hear. I, Thaxcroll, Huntmaster of the Ironclad Fang, claim this warrior as my brother. I bind him to my blood, my honor, my name. From this day forward, he is no longer an outsider. He is no longer prey. He is one of us. He took the ancient knife and drew it across his palm. Dark blood welled up from the wound, dripping onto the metal floor. Then he handed the knife to Danny. Danny took the blade without hesitation. He drew it across his own palm, feeling the sting of the cut, watching his red blood flow. Thaxcroll reached out and clasped Danny's hand in his own. Their blood mingled, red and black together, dripping between their fingers. You do not need our claws, Thaxcroll said. You do not need our fangs. You have something we have forgotten. The patience to suffer. The will to adapt. The fire that refuses to die. He looked into Danny's eyes. From this day, you are not prey. You are not guest. You are brother. The hall was absolutely silent. Then, one by one, the Kovathi warriors began to kneel. They dropped to one knee in the ancient gesture of respect, their heads bowed, their amber eyes on the floor. Commander Dralvath knelt. The young warriors knelt. Even Kethoan, in the back of the room, slowly lowered himself to the ground. Danny stood in the center of them all, his hand clasped with the Thaxcroll's, his blood mixing with alien blood, and felt something he had never expected to feel on this ship. He felt like he belonged. Later, when the ceremony was over and the crew had dispersed, Danny stood alone by a viewport and looked out at the stars. Thaxcroll found him there, 2 cups of some strong Kovathi drink in his hands. You seem thoughtful, brother, the Huntmaster said, handing him a cup. Danny took it and sipped. It burned going down, but it was not unpleasant. I was thinking about what happens next. What this means. Not just for me, but for all of humanity. Thaxcroll nodded. The story will spread. It is already spreading. Every Kovathi on this ship will tell their families, their friends, their clans. They will tell them about the human who survived Varkath, the soft-skin who killed a Vorn beast, the prey thing who became a brother. He looked out at the stars alongside Danny. Your people will not be underestimated again. That is a gift more valuable than any skull. Danny smiled. My grandmother would say that was stubborn of me. Your grandmother was wise. Thaxcroll raised his cup. To stubbornness. To survival. To the fire that refuses to die. Danny raised his own cup. To brotherhood. They drank together, human and Kovathi, standing side by side in the starlight. And across the galaxy, the story began to spread. The story of Danny Lawson. The story of humanity. The story of a species that did not need claws or fangs or armor to be strong. A species that endured. That adapted. that refused to be broken, a species that, when the time came, could stand among the fiercest warriors in the galaxy and call them brother. The shuttle dropped out of hyperspace near Tessar 4, and Kethral immediately knew something was wrong. The sensor readings showed far more activity than the briefing had predicted. The Kravith Hive ship was not just passing through the system. It was in orbit around the colony world. "That's not good," Danny said, looking over the pilot's shoulder at the readings. "There's supposed to be a Talvari settlement down there, right?" Kethral nodded. 312 colonists, mostly farmers and researchers. The settlement has minimal defenses. And that big ugly thing in orbit has how many Kravith on it? The pilot, a young Talvari named Sevalon, checked her instruments. Estimated population of the hive ship is between 8 and 12,000. The shuttle went quiet. Even the humans stopped their constant chatter. Everyone knew what the Kravith did to colonies. Everyone had seen the images from the 17 worlds they had consumed. The Kravith did not take prisoners. They did not negotiate. They fed. "We need to report this to command," Kethral said. "They will send a fleet. How long will that take?" Amy asked. 6 hours. Perhaps 7. Amy looked at Danny. Something passed between them, a silent communication that Kethral could not read. Then Danny turned back to the sensor display. "What's the status of the colony? Have the Kravith landed yet?" Sevalon checked again. "I am detecting Kravith life signs on the surface. Approximately 200. They appear to be concentrated around the northern edge of the settlement." "So they just started," Kyle said. "The colonists might still be alive." "Some of them," Kethral agreed. "But we cannot intervene. Our mission is reconnaissance. We are not equipped for combat against a force of that size." "You've got to be kidding me." This came from Greg, the older soldier. He had been quiet for most of the trip, but now his eyes were hard. "There are people dying down there right now. Kids, probably. And we're just going to fly away and write a report? The logical course of action is to retreat and summon reinforcements. If we engage, we will die, and the colonists will die anyway. If we retreat, we survive, and the fleet has a chance to save some of them." "Some of them," Greg repeated. "You hear yourself? You're talking about acceptable losses like those are just numbers on a screen." Kethral did not understand the human's anger. He was stating simple facts. The mathematics were clear. A force of 20 soldiers could not defeat 200 Kravith. Attempting to do so would result in total mission failure and 0 survivors. Retreat was the only logical option. "I understand this is difficult," Kethral said. "But we must think clearly. Emotion will not save those colonists." Danny had been quiet through this exchange. Now he spoke and his voice was different than before. The easy warmth was gone. What remained was something colder, harder. "Sevalon, can you land us 2 clicks south of the settlement? Somewhere with cover?" The pilot looked at Kethral, uncertain. "Sir?" "Do it," Danny said before Kethral could respond. "That's an order." "He does not command this mission," Kethral said. "I am the senior officer present." Danny turned to face him. The human was shorter than Kethral, lighter, weaker in every physical way. But something in his eyes made Kethral want to step back. "Then relieve me of duty," Danny said. "Put me in restraints. Lock me in the cargo hold. Because that's the only way I'm not going down there." "Me too," Amy said quietly. "Same," said Kyle. One by one, every human in the shuttle spoke. Greg, Lisa, Megan, all of them. They were all willing to throw away their careers, their freedom, possibly their lives, for 300 people they had never met. Kethral had no framework for understanding this. In Talvari culture, the individual existed to serve the greater good. Personal feelings were irrelevant. A soldier who disobeyed orders based on emotion was removed from service and treated for mental deficiency. But these humans were not deficient. They were not broken. They simply operated by rules that Kethril could not comprehend. "This is madness," he said finally. "You will die for nothing." "Maybe," Danny agreed. "But I'll die trying. And that's worth something where I come from." The shuttle descended toward the surface of Tazara 4. Kethril watched the planet grow larger in the live view screen and felt something strange in his chest. His hearts were beating faster than normal. His hands wanted to shake. For a moment, he wondered if he was becoming ill. It took him several minutes to realize what he was actually feeling. He was afraid, not of the Kravith. He had faced them before, in larger battles with better odds. He knew how to fight them, how to exploit their weaknesses, how to survive against them. No, he was afraid of something else. He was afraid of the humans, afraid of their certainty, afraid of the way they moved toward death without hesitation, afraid that their madness might be something more than madness. The shuttle landed in a small valley surrounded by tall purple trees. The humans checked their weapons and gathered their gear with quick, efficient movements. Whatever chaos they had shown on the station was gone now. They moved like a single organism, each person knowing exactly where to be and what to do. Danny approached Kethril one final time. "You can stay with the shuttle," he said. "I won't think less of you. This isn't your fight." Kethril looked at the human, at the squad forming up behind him, at the smoke rising in the distance from the direction of the colony. 312 Talvari colonists. His people. His species. They were dying right now, being torn apart and consumed while he stood here calculating probabilities. For 30 cycles, Kethril had believed that logic was the highest virtue, that emotion was weakness, that the Talvari way was the correct way. But the Talvari way said to retreat. The Talvari way said those colonists were acceptable losses. The Talvari way said to let them die. And for the first time in his life, Kethril found that he could not accept what logic demanded. "I will come with you," he heard himself say. "If we are going to die for nothing, we will die together." Danny smiled, and this time the expression did not make Kethril uncomfortable. "That's the spirit. Stay close, watch our backs, and try to keep up. We've got some people to save." They moved out into the alien forest. 20 soldiers against an army. Logic abandoned. Sanity questionable. And somewhere in his chest, in the place where Talvari were not supposed to feel anything at all, Kethril's fear began to transform into something else entirely. They reached the edge of the settlement in 20 minutes. What they found there would stay with Kethril for the rest of his life. The Kravith had already begun their harvest. Bodies lay in the streets, some of them still moving, most of them not. The creatures themselves were everywhere, their black exoskeletons gleaming in the light of the burning buildings. They stood twice as tall as a human, with forearms ending in razor-sharp claws and mouths filled with teeth designed to tear flesh from bone. "Contact," Danny said quietly, holding up his fist. The squad froze behind him. "I count 30 in the main square. More coming from the north. Civilians are being held near that large structure on the left." Kethril looked where Danny was pointing. He could see them now, a group of Talvari huddled together, surrounded by Kravith guards. There were maybe 50 of them, women, children, males who had probably been farmers just hours ago. They were silent, too afraid to scream, too shocked to run. "How do you want to play this?" Amy asked. Danny studied the scene for a long moment. "Lisa, Kyle, you two take position on that rooftop. When I give the signal, you start dropping the guards around the civilians. Greg, Megan, you're with me on the left flank. We hit them hard and fast, draw their attention away from the hostages. Amy, you lead the rest of the squad down the center. Get those people out and moving south toward the shuttle. What about me? Catherall asked. Danny looked at him. You stick with Amy. Help protect the civilians. And if things go bad, get them to the shuttle and leave us behind. I will not leave you. If things go bad, you will. That's in order. Danny's voice left no room for argument. Our job is to save those people, not to survive. Understand? Catherall did not understand. Every part of his training screamed that this was wrong. Soldiers did not throw their lives away. Soldiers calculated, strategized, preserved their forces for future battles. What Danny was proposing was suicide with extra steps, but he nodded anyway. Let's move, Danny said. And remember, people, no dying until I say so. Yes, Sergeant. The squad responded in unison. Someone, Catherall thought it was Megan, added, but after that we can die, right? After that, knock yourself out. They split up. Catherall followed Amy and 4 other humans down a narrow alley that smelled of smoke and blood. His hearts were pounding so hard he could hear them in his ears. His hands were steady on his rifle only through conscious effort. The signal came 3 minutes later. A burst of gunfire from Danny's position, followed by screaming, both human and Kravith. The creatures in the main square turned toward the noise, exactly as Danny had planned. Now, Amy shouted, "Go, go, go!" They burst into the square. Catherall fired his pulse rifle on full automatic, dropping 2 Kravith guards before they could react. Beside him, the humans were doing the same, their projectile weapons loud and brutal. The air filled with the smell of gunpowder and the screech of dying creatures. Civilians move. Amy was already among the hostages, pulling them to their feet, pushing them toward the southern road. Follow me. Stay low and run. Catherall provided cover fire while the Telvari colonists fled. Most of them were in shock, moving like sleepwalkers through a nightmare. A female clutching an infant. A male with blood streaming down his face. Children who were too young to understand why their world was ending. Then the Kravith reinforcements arrived. They came from everywhere. From the buildings, from the streets, from the sky. The creatures could jump 30 meters in a single leap, and suddenly they were landing all around the squad, claws slashing, jaws snapping. Fall back. Amy ordered, "Protect the civilians." What happened next was something Catherall would never be able to fully describe. A Kravith warrior landed directly in front of Kyle, 3 times his size, claws raised for the kill. Kyle did not run. He did not even try to dodge. Instead, he lowered his shoulder and charged directly into the creature, driving it back just long enough for Lisa to put 3 rounds through its skull. Another creature grabbed Megan from behind, its claws sinking into her shoulder. She screamed, twisted, and jammed her combat knife into its eye. Even as she fell, bleeding badly, she was still firing, still fighting, still protecting the colonists behind her. Greg took a claw through his stomach. Catherall saw it happen, saw the spray of red blood, saw the older human's face go pale with shock and pain. Any other soldier would have fallen, would have died. Greg simply pressed one hand against the wound and kept shooting with the other. "I'm not done yet," he said through gritted teeth. Not by a long shot. On the left flank, Danny and his team were being overwhelmed. Catherall could hear their guns firing, could hear Danny screaming orders, could hear the inhuman sounds of Kravith closing in. There were too many. There were always too many. "We need to help them," Catherall said. "Negative," Amy responded. Her left arm hung useless at her side, slashed open from shoulder to elbow. She was pale from blood loss, but still standing, still directing the evacuation. "Danny's buying us time. We don't waste it. They will die." Amy looked at him with those strange human eyes. And Kethril saw something there that he did not have a word for: grief, acceptance, and underneath it all, something that burned like fire. "Then we make their sacrifice count," she said. "Keep moving." The colonists were running now, finally understanding that survival depended on speed. Kethril and Amy and the remaining humans formed a rear guard, falling back step by step, killing every Kravith that got too close. Behind them, the sounds of fighting continued. Danny was still alive, still fighting, still buying them time with his blood and the blood of his soldiers. And then Kethril heard something that made him stop, made him turn, made him forget everything he had been taught about logic and survival and acceptable losses. He heard Danny Vance laughing. The human was surrounded by Kravith corpses, covered in blood both red and black. One arm clearly broken, his armor torn to shreds. And he was laughing. Not the desperate laugh of a madman facing death. Something else. Something that sounded like joy. "That all you got?" Danny shouted at the creatures closing in around him. "My grandmother hits harder than you." In that moment, Kethril understood something about humans that no report had ever captured. No analysis had ever explained. They were not brave despite their fear. They were not strong despite their weakness. They were something far more dangerous. They simply refused to stop. Kethril raised his rifle and ran back toward the fighting. He heard Amy shout his name, heard her curse in her native language, heard her order the others to keep moving the civilians. He did not care. For the first time in 30 cycles, he did not calculate the odds. He did not assess the tactical situation. He simply refused to let Danny Vance die alone. The Telvari within him screamed that this was madness, that this was suicide, that this was everything his species had evolved beyond. But there was something else within him now. Something the humans had put there. Something that felt like fire in his chest and thunder in his hearts. And it was stronger than logic. It was stronger than fear. It was. He would later realize the beginning of everything. The Coalition fleet arrived at hour 4, Mark 23. Kethril knew the exact time because he had been counting the minutes. Each one had felt like a lifetime. Each one had been purchased with blood and pain and acts of courage that defied everything he thought. He knew about the universe. He was sitting in the dirt when the dropships descended from the sky. His rifle was empty. His uniform was soaked with blood, most of it not his own. Around him lay the bodies of Kravith warriors, so many that he had lost count somewhere around the 50th. The humans had held the line against 200 Kravith. With only 20 soldiers, they had held the line for over 4 hours. They had protected 287 Telvari colonists. They had turned a massacre into something else entirely, and they had paid the price. Medics swarmed the battlefield, their white uniforms quickly staining red. Kethril watched them work without really seeing. His mind kept replaying the same moments over and over. Kyle throwing himself at a Kravith warrior. Greg fighting with his intestines literally spilling out of his stomach. Megan dragging 2 children to safety with a Kravith, claw still embedded in her back. And Danny, always Danny, laughing in the face of death, refusing to fall, holding the line until the very last second. Kethril Voran? He looked up. A Telvari medic was standing over him, scanner in hand. "You have sustained multiple lacerations and a fractured rib," the medic said. "You should come with me for treatment." "The humans," Kethril heard himself say. "How are the humans?" The medic hesitated. In that hesitation, Kethril felt something crack inside his chest. "They are being treated aboard the medical frigate. I do not have specific information about their conditions." "How many survived?" Another hesitation. 7. 7 out of 12. 5 humans dead. 5 more who would never be the same. All for people they had never met, on a world they had no connection to, for a species that had dismissed them as chaotic and undisciplined. Kethril stood up on legs that did not want to hold him. The medic reached out to steady him, but he waved her away. "I need to see them," he said. "You need medical attention." "I need to see them." Something in his voice made the medic step back. Perhaps she recognized that arguing would be pointless. Perhaps she simply did not want to deal with a soldier who had clearly lost his grip on proper Telvari emotional control. The medical frigate was a chaos of activity. Wounded colonists filled the hallways. Medical staff rushed from room to room. The smell of blood and antiseptic was overwhelming. Kethril found the human section by following the sound of Amy's voice. She was arguing with a doctor about something, her words too fast and sharp for his translator to keep up. Her left arm was wrapped in thick bandages, and her face was the color of ash, but she was standing. "Lieutenant Gutierrez," Kethril said. Amy turned. For a moment, her expression was hard, the same hardness he had seen when she ordered him to leave Danny behind. Then it softened into something that might have been exhaustion or grief or both. "Kethril, good to see you on your feet. How are the others?" She took a breath. Let it out slowly. "Greg's in surgery. 50-50 chance. Lisa lost her left eye, but she live. Kyle and Megan are stable. Danny's." She stopped, swallowed. "Danny's awake. He's asking for you." "For me?" "Yeah, don't ask me why. The man has 17 broken bones and internal bleeding, but he won't shut up about the Telvari who came back to save him." Kethril found Danny in a small room near the back of the medical section. The human was lying on a bed that seemed too small for him, covered in tubes and wires and bandages. His face was swollen almost beyond recognition, and one arm was immobilized in a rigid cast, but his eyes were open. And when he saw Kethril, he smiled. "There he is," Danny said. His voice was weak, barely above a whisper. "The crazy alien who charged back into a losing fight. You were dying. I was buying time. There's a difference." Danny coughed, winced in pain, then smiled again. "Though I'll admit, having some backup was nice." Kethril stood at the foot of the bed, not knowing what to say. In Telvari culture, there were no words for this situation. They did not have rituals for honoring those who threw away their lives for strangers. They did not have language for the emotions churning through Kethril's chest. "I do not understand you," he finally said. "Any of you. What you did today was illogical. It was tactically unsound. By every measure I know, you should all be dead, and the colonists with you." "Yeah," Danny agreed. "Math was definitely not on our side. Then why? Why did you do it?" Danny was quiet for a moment. The machines around him beeped softly, monitoring his failing body, keeping him alive through technology and willpower. "You know what my grandmother used to say?" Danny asked. "She used to say that courage isn't about not being scared. It's about being scared and doing the right thing anyway. But how do you know what the right thing is? How can you be certain when the odds are against you?" "You can't be," Danny said simply. "That's kind of the point. You can't know. You can't calculate it. You just have to choose what kind of person you want. It matters." Kethril felt something burning in his eyes. It took him a moment to realize that he was crying. Telvari did not cry. Their tear ducts had atrophied millions of years ago, deemed unnecessary by evolution. But somehow, impossibly, there was moisture on his face. "Today, I felt fear," Kethril said. "Real fear, for the first time in my life. Fear of the Kravith? No." Kethril shook his head. "Fear of myself. Fear of what I was willing to accept. For 30 cycles, I believed that logic was strength. That detachment was wisdom. That some losses were acceptable if the numbers said so." He moved closer to Danny's bed, close enough to see his own reflection in the human's dark eyes. "You showed me that I was wrong. All of you did. Those colonists are alive because you refused to do the math. Because you cared about people you had never met. Because you valued their lives more than your own." "That's not special," Danny said. "That's just being human." "No," Kethrol said firmly. "It is not just being human. It is something more. Something my species has forgotten, if we ever knew it at all." He reached out and touched Danny's uninjured hand. The gesture felt strange, foreign, like speaking a language he had never learned. "I want to understand it," Kethrol said. "This thing you have. This fire that burns inside you. I want to learn how to carry it myself." Danny looked at him for a long moment. Then his battered face split into a grin. "Stick around," he said. "We've got plenty of fire to share." Somewhere in the distance, machines beeped and doctors shouted, and the wounded cried out in pain. The war against the Kravith was far from over. More battles waited. More death. More impossible choices. But for the first time in 30 cycles, Kethrol Vorn did not face the future with cold logic alone. He faced it with something warmer. Something human. Something that felt like hope. 2 weeks after the Battle of Tessara IV, Kethrol Vorn sat alone in his quarters aboard the Coalition station, staring at an empty screen. He had been staring at it for 3 hours. The cursor blinked at him, waiting for words that refused to come. Coalition Command had requested a full after-action report. They wanted tactical analysis. They wanted recommendations for future joint operations. They wanted Kethrol to put into official language what had happened on that colony world, to translate chaos and courage into neat paragraphs that bureaucrats could file away and forget. He had tried writing it a dozen times. Each attempt had ended the same way, with Kethrol deleting everything and starting over. The problem was not that he did not know what to say. The problem was that what he needed to say could not be contained in a standard military report. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. When he opened it, he found Amy standing in the hallway. Her arm was out of the sling now, though she still moved it carefully. The scars on her face had faded from red to pink. "You look terrible," she said. "I have been attempting to write my report." "Yeah, I heard. Command's getting impatient. They want their data." She said the word like it was an insult. What they want and what I can give them are not the same thing. Amy smiled slightly. "Mind if I come in?" Kethrol stepped aside to let her enter. His quarters were small and sparse, exactly like every other Telvari living space on the station. Amy looked around with an expression that might have been pity or understanding. "So what's the problem?" she asked, sitting on the edge of his bed. "Writer's block?" "I do not know how to explain what happened. The facts are simple enough. We were outnumbered. We should have retreated. Instead, we fought, and against all probability, we won. But the facts do not capture the truth of it." "What is the truth of it?" Kethrol turned to face her. This human who had led her soldiers into certain death, who had kept fighting with one arm destroyed, who had ordered him to leave her people behind, even knowing he would not obey. "The truth is that everything I believed about warfare was wrong," he said. "The truth is that your species fights in ways that should not work but do. The truth is that I felt things on Tessara IV that I do not have words for, emotions that my people evolved past millions of years ago." "Like what?" "Like..." Kethrol struggled to find the right words. "When Kyle jumped on that Kravith warrior, when he sacrificed himself so Lisa could take the shot, I felt something in my chest. A tightness. A heat. I wanted to scream, but not from fear. From something else. Pride, maybe. Or grief. Sometimes they feel the same. And when Danny refused to stop fighting, even when he was wounded, even when he was outnumbered, Even when there was no logical reason to continue, I felt something else. Something that made me want to follow him, to fight beside him, to be whatever he needed me to be. Amy nodded slowly. We call that loyalty. Or love, sometimes, depending on who you're talking about. These are not Telvari concepts. No, Amy agreed. They're not. But maybe that's okay. Maybe you don't have to be Telvari all the time. Kethril considered this. He had spent his entire life believing that his species' way was the correct way, that emotion was weakness, that logic was strength, that the path to victory lay in cold calculation and acceptable losses. But the humans had shown him another path, a messy, chaotic, irrational path that somehow led to the same destination. Maybe there was room for both approaches. Maybe the universe was big enough for logic and love to coexist. I have made a decision, Kethril said suddenly. About the report? About everything. He turned back to his screen and began to type. The words came easily now, flowing out of him like water released from a dam. Amy watched in silence as he wrote, her expression unreadable. When he was finished, Kethril read the report aloud. Fighting next to humans, I felt fear in a way I never had before. Not fear of the enemy, fear of my own limitations. Fear of the coldness I had mistaken for discipline. The humans taught me that true courage is not the absence of emotion, but the willingness to act despite certainty of loss. I am requesting permanent reassignment to human forces. If the Kravith are to be defeated, it will not be through superior tactics or calculated sacrifice. It will be because someone, somewhere, refuses to leave. The humans call this quality many things: love, loyalty, stubbornness. I do not know the correct word. I only know that I wish to learn it. Silence filled the room. Amy stared at him with wide eyes. That's your official report? Yes. Command is going to hate it. Probably. They'll think you've gone crazy. That the humans corrupted you somehow. Let them think what they want. I know what I experienced. I know what I learned. Kethril hit the send button before he could change his mind. And I know where I belong now. Amy was quiet for a long moment. Then she stood up, walked over to him, and did something that no one had ever done to Kethril before. She put her arms around him and pulled him close. Welcome to the family, she said. Kethril did not know how to respond. Physical affection was not something Telvari engaged in, but he found himself returning the embrace awkwardly, his arms wrapping around Amy's shoulders, his face pressing against her hair. It felt strange. It felt wonderful. It felt like the beginning of something he could not yet name. 3 days later, his request was officially approved. Danny, still recovering in the medical bay, laughed so hard when he heard the news that he pulled 2 stitches. Kyle immediately began teaching Kethril human card games. Lisa offered to show him how to properly field strip a human rifle. Even Greg, still bedridden and facing months of rehabilitation, managed to give him a thumbs up and a weak smile. Megan, because she was Megan, bought him his first beer. You're going to hate it, she warned him. Telvari can't process alcohol properly. You'll probably throw up. She was right. He did throw up. Twice. But he also laughed, really laughed, for the first time in his life. The sound surprised everyone, including himself. It was rough and unpracticed. More like a cough than anything musical, but it was real. Afterwards, as he sat with the humans in the station's common area, watching them joke and argue and tease each other with the casual cruelty of people who would die for one another without hesitation, Kethril thought about what his life had been before. 30 cycles of service, hundreds of battles, thousands of calculated decisions, and not once had he felt like he was part of something bigger than himself. Not once had he understood what it meant to truly belong. Now he did. The war against the Kravith would continue. There would be more battles, more losses, more impossible choices. Kethral knew that some of his new family would not survive what was coming. He knew that he himself might not survive, but that was okay, because fighting next to humans, he had learned something that all the logic in the universe could never have taught him. He had learned that some things were worth dying for. Some people were worth fighting for. Some bonds were stronger than fear, stronger than death, stronger than the cold mathematics of survival. He had learned what it meant to be human. And, as Danny raised his glass and the others followed, as voices lifted in a toast that Kethral did not fully understand but participated in anyway, he realized that he had found something he did not know he was looking for. He had found a home. The future was uncertain. The enemy was vast. The odds were still against them. But for the first time in 30 cycles, Kethral Voran faced that future with a smile on his face and fire in his heart, and he was no longer afraid.